Workplace pensions are great, right? You pay in, your company pays in, and the taxman pays in. What's not to like? The idea of a government-endorsed workplace pension scheme is a good one. It encourages people to save when perhaps sometimes they wouldn't normally. It also stops companies from sidelining their responsibilities towards employees. It's also a good move from the government's point of view. They're decreasing the burden of you on them in later life. Convenient, eh? The government move to mandate pensions in the workplace is a good one, but there are some issues. Now, you'll be auto-enrolled into these schemes if you're over 22 and you're earning more than £10,000 a year. So if you're under 10k, sorry, you get no pension. And if you're under 22, yet again, sorry, you get no pension. And this might not seem like a lot, but these are the earliest years of your pension pot, so they have over 45 years to grow. So if you were 18 and you earned £20,000 a year at a 6% modest interest growth rate on your pension contributions, over the 46 years they would be invested, that would equate to just around £80,000. So you'd put in £2,500 and that would grow to £80,000. Don't seem like a lot, but when you work it out, that is a horrendous amount of money you're losing out on. Even once you've met the minimum requirements of being 22 or earning over 10 grand, there are still some problems. The headline figure is 8%, 5% from you, 3% from your employer. What it actually works out to is 4% from you, 3% from your employer, and 1% in the form of tax reduction from the government. However, it's not 8% of your total salary or income. There are upper and lower limits. The lower limit is £6,240 and the higher limit is £50,270. So you'll only get contributions on any salary in between these two figures. So if we work out the contributions you're missing out on below this lower limit, the limit of £6,240, it works out to just under £500 you're missing out of your pension contributions each year. So again, if we take our conservative rate of 6% growth, this works out to over a 46-year period of £118,000. Criminal. So if we take this figure as well as the figure we produced earlier for the 4 years we were missing out on for being under the minimum age limit, that's almost 200k missing from your pension pot that you would otherwise get. I mean, if you just looked at the figures, 8%, and from 18 to 68, I'm going to get that 8%, 200 grand down. Shocking. If you're lucky enough to be above the £50,270 upper limit, then you really have to take into consideration that you're getting nothing above that limit. So effectively, it brings down your annual percentage you're paying of your wages. For example, if you're lucky enough to earn 100k, yeah, I know, it would be great. Your pension contributions are only based on £43,790. So if you work that out, on your 100k, that's actually only 3.5% of your income going into a pension. Nowhere near enough. Now we've looked at how much is going into your pension, we need to look at where it's going. Now most companies auto-enrolled into schemes like Nest, and this was simply because they offered an easy way in. They were quite low in costs for the actual company, and they were set up just for this purpose. Luckily, these have fee caps, so you pay a fee when you join a pension scheme to the provider. So the current fee cap is 0.75%. And although this is quite low, it's important to keep an eye on this because this is under review and it can change in the future. And companies don't really treat this as a cap, they sort of treat it as a yardstick. They just basically put their prices right up to the cap. I mean, if you don't believe me, look at student fees and university fees. Point proven. Now, when we log into our online account, it's actually quite hard to see where your money's invested. I mean, you really do have to do some digging into what funds it's actually in. Now, usually the funds that you get to choose from, if you get to choose at all, will be represented in 3 different categories, a sort of a low, a medium and a high. Now, they may have different names, but generally this means the lower ones will be heavily into bonds, and hopefully the higher ones are more into stocks, as they're deemed more risky. Now, I say the higher risk ones are more heavily invested in stocks, but even when you look into those ones, you can see that bonds play a big part in all these funds. Now, I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice in any ways or means, but I'm quite young, 33, youngish. I have a long time to ride out the ups and downs of the stock market, and bonds are generally considered to be the investment of choice when you're closer to retirement, when you want a bit more safety. The next sin in my eyes is that because these are UK providers of pensions, they're generally heavily weighted towards UK companies. And although the UK economy is a good one, it's by no means the best one. It's full of more old type companies like banks and oil reliant companies that really don't have much potential growth. I generally prefer to see more weight towards the US, and sadly this generally doesn't happen. I mean, check, but in mine it really didn't. The US is the biggest tech giant, it's the largest market in the world. The innovations they're coming up with, like Tesla, they're fantastic. There's loads of potential for growth, and we can see that the US just does better historically than the UK. I'd also prefer to see more weighting towards the emerging markets. Yes, they're more volatile, and yes, they're deemed more risky, but these are the emerging economies of the future. And as a result, the growth rate is likely to be more than anywhere else. So at this point, you're thinking the workplace pension's rubbish, right? No, hang on. Although there are many downsides, the big plus side, the elephant in the room, is the unbeatable 50% on your contributions that you're going to get from your employer and the government. Now, it's up to you what you do, but what I have done is pick the highest risk available to me and put the minimum amount needed to get the maximum employer match. Yes, that's right. Some people are lucky enough for their employer to go above and beyond what the government has set as the minimum requirements. So, for instance, if my employer was willing to match up to 10%, then I would put in 10% of my earnings. Not a penny more, not a penny less. So I'll guarantee to get that 10%, effectively free money, from my employer. If you're like me, my employer will only put in 3%, so I put in the 5%. So I get that 3% match. However, there is something to take away from the downsides. As we've changed over time, we no longer stay in the same job for the whole of our lives. We move about, we seek different careers, and as a result, we build up pension pots from old companies that sit there that are no longer getting contributed to. Now, some people are unaware you can actually transfer these pension pots to different providers. So you can consolidate all these little pots into one big pot, which is what I've done for a SIP, or a self-investment personal pension. Now, by doing this, I get the benefit of a wide choice of investments, and I get to know and choose where my money actually goes. I also get control over the fees I'm paying, so I can keep more of my money, and if fees change at any time, I can swap my pension about to get them fees back down again. I've also got the option of using a robo-investor, so if I wasn't that confident in my choices or just didn't want the hassle of investing my own money, I could pay someone a percentage fee, which is usually quite low, and they would invest my money for me, but more in line with the risk tolerances I wanted. But by far the biggest plus for me is that I can easily keep track of my total pension pot fund. Before this, I didn't really have a clue. I mean, I couldn't even remember what pensions I had, so I physically had to write a list of everyone I'd ever worked for and go through them one by one. Didn't I have a pension? And there was two that I'd completely forgotten about. Can you imagine at 68 I sat down and tried to do this over a full career of all the employers I've ever worked for? Absolutely no chance. That's why it's important to do it sooner rather than later. So hopefully at this point we know how to maximise our current workplace pension. We're going to gather and streamline our old pensions to get them working harder, but we're still missing out on that true 8% of total contributions of our salary. Or perhaps you want to increase this, and we don't actually know where's best to put all these old, smaller pots of pensions. Well, that's where we need to discuss SIPs. And that's something we're going to do in a future video. So make sure you hit subscribe and the notification bell so you get notified when that video is out. There's links down below of the investment platforms and products that I use if you want to check them out. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.